back in the day, when I was working in the Jobcorp and very excited about President Johnson declaring war on poverty and opening up over 20 large urban centers for Job Corpsmen, men and women, with the average capacity of between 1,000 and 2,000 corpsmen, I felt like I was part of a winning team, that we were going to actually get people trained, get people employed, have people have family wage jobs, and do away with the poverty class in this country for the most part. Well, there were people who found it fashionable to take pot shots at the program for political advantage. It was the government spending money on something. Oh my word, spending money on people? One of those people was a senator named Patrick Moynihan from somewhere in New England. I don't remember if he was one of the United States senators from New York at the time, but somewhere near there. And he was saying that there were better ways to do this, and so on and so forth, trying to give excuses for liberals, which he was considered to be a moderate Democrat. He was trying to give excuses for opposing the spending of this money. He also later, in 1968, when Bobby Kennedy was shot, he came out and said that we all have our hearts broken or our spirits broken eventually, but we don't expect to have it happen so young, because Bobby Kennedy had been killed, Martin Luther had been killed, Medgar Evers had been killed, Malcolm X had been killed, and all these very outspoken people that were exciting people that maybe we could trigger a passion for a better America and better people, had been shot and killed. And so he said, well, you know, we all know that eventually we'll be broken, but we don't expect it to happen when we're so young. And that really echoed with me. And I've been thinking lately about people getting broken, or to put it another way, disgraced. We've had two governors in Oregon now, well, three during my time. First Neil Goldschmidt, who was eventually outed for having molested and raped his babysitter, and then he continued to stalk her and demand sex from her for years and years and years. Neil Goldschmidt. And then we had John Kitzhaber, whose girlfriend was being paid over $100,000 to lobby him while they were living together, and she didn't pay taxes on it. And all this came out at once right after he got elected for his, I think, fourth term to be governor. And the leaders of the Democratic leaders of the House and the Senate met with him and told him, this is a no-go. We're not going to work with you. You need to resign. So he was the first governor, I think, in the history of the state that left in a disgrace. And then there's Ted Kulongoski, who had a battle in the press about whether he had known about Neil Goldschmidt's crimes before he appointed Neil to be the chair of the Education Commission, a very prestigious job. And the question was, why would you appoint a multi-felon to a very prestigious job? And everybody knew that Ted Kulongoski was more or less a pawn for Goldschmidt, and that made it much more difficult for him. And when he was leaving office, they interviewed him, and then they reported that polling indicated that after this flap came up about when did you know and why did you appoint him anyway, if you did know, that his approval rating dropped precipitously and never rebounded. So we've had a series of governors in Oregon who have had significant disgrace or disgrace-like experiences at or near the end of their careers. But there are many other people in my life that I've seen, you might say, bite the dust late in their careers, and I've marveled at it. I've seen some. I used to think that John Kitzhaber was a fantastic governor, for example, and going down toward the end of your career. Too bad. It's bad, and it's hard to see it happen. And in yesterday's paper was the person who was my #1 mentor when I was a young lawyer, and that went on for years. And his name is Dan O'Leary. He was in the obituaries yesterday. Died on December 7th, and at the age of 1 year older than me. He used to be my confidant, and I've spent many hours mulling over things that I was dealing with in the legislature, and I always relied on him for his wise counsel. One of the things that when he got dementia from drinking, and it was very painful for me to see that man that I looked up so much. Well, after he got dementia, I learned from a former law partner of his that he actually had gotten 2 DUIs in his early days of lobbying the legislature, going down there and meeting with labor leaders who were heavy drinkers and drinking with them and then trying to get back home. I had no idea that anything like that had ever happened to him. He always seemed to me to be the epitome of rectitude. And I'm glad that he held himself out that way to me, because it helped me restrain myself from doing some foolish things like drinking in Salem before I tried to drive home, for example, or overdoing it after work. I only rarely is not quite the right word, but I didn't real often go out and drink after work. There were a lot of lawyers who drank every night after work, and it was a wonderful seminar, a floating seminar about recent Supreme Court decisions and recent developments of one kind or another that affected our line of work. But a little of that was good, but a lot of it was not. And he had a standing rule with his wife that he had to be home by 6 o'clock and after work, and he stayed with that. So little did I know that he had feet of clay with these 2 DUIs, and I knew he was continuing to drink as he was getting older, but I had no idea that it was going to turn him into a person who didn't recognize his friends and had to go and live in a memory unit until he died a couple of weeks ago. What a way to end. So I was talking with one of his former law partners yesterday, and we were talking about how he was tricked and deceived by Ron Wyden, Senator Ron Wyden, into thinking he could get appointed to be a federal court judge. And he went back to the law school and got a master's degree in law, which is quite unusual, in order to give himself more credentials to get to be appointed to a federal bench. And then he applied, and the Senator Wyden was talking to him on the phone and calling him Your Honor, and acting like it was just going to be a done deal. And The problem was, at that time, we had a Republican president, George W. Bush, and we had a Republican U.S. Senator named Gordon Smith from Pendleton. When you are there in the Judiciary Committee, and the president is the same party as you, it doesn't matter who the chair of the Judiciary Committee is. The senator gets to make the call. So Ron Wyden was being very deceptive and telling Dan O'Leary that he could get him appointed to the bench. He couldn't get him appointed to the bench. Gordon Smith got to say who got appointed during those years from Oregon. And after Gordon got the president to appoint somebody else, then people who were kind of in the know were saying, yeah, poor Dan, he should have known that the senator of the same party as the president gets to name the judges. Well, the other thing that happened with Dan was that he got into a fight with his partners when he believed that another partner, a junior partner, was siphoning off cases and settling them outside of the office to get the attorney fee without sharing it with the firm. And when the other two senior partners wouldn't agree with Dan, he resigned from the partnership, which he had built that firm with the other partners for 30 years at least. And it was a very successful firm and helping a lot of working people. And he just couldn't stand it that his two other senior partners wouldn't agree with him that this deception was going on. So he left the firm because he couldn't stand that he thought somebody was siphoning cases off. And then he went and got a master's degree so he could get on the bench based on being deceived and misled by a United States senator that he get appointed to the bench. So he had two very unfortunate things happen late in his professional career. He went to work with another firm in town, which was a business-oriented firm, after he left the plaintiff's firm. And I went to his retirement reception in the afternoon from that firm. But what bitter blows he experienced after many years of being so successful and so respected. People looked up to him so much. When I first saw him, he came and taught a class at the law school in workers' comp, and I was just amazed at how bright he was and articulate, and he had a sense of humor, and God. And then for it to end the way it did, not to speak of the disgrace that Neil Goldschmidt suffered and that John Kitzhaber suffered, and to a lesser extent that Ted Kunguski. At the end of people's careers, things can come tumbling down. And I won't even go into the apparent, to me, dementia that's affecting our current president. But it just, as an older person, amazes me how people who have been very successful and respected and honored and celebrated can take a nosedive toward the end. I don't know how interesting this will be to anybody, but it's sure interesting to me.